Spiritus repletiorum cora fidelium et tui amoris ignei signum accende, emite spiritum tuum creabuntur,
et renovatis pacem terrae.
Oremus Deus cora fidelium sancti spiritus illustratione docuisti, da nobis in iodem spiritu recta sapere et eius semper consolatione gaudere, per Christum Dominum nostrum.
Amen.
Sede sapientiae,
Ora pro nobis.
omni Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, we're on the objections to things that to this case of whether bishops are higher than presbyters. I'll let you read those on your own. You'll never remember them anyway. It would be something to read if you are answering a Protestant. I had to make reference to this the other day for that Protestant. They don't believe in a divinely established hierarchy, that bishops are just elected and that's it. They just like you'd make a president of a corporation or something. But you would never. It goes into some of the quotes of Saint Jerome and so forth. You would forget all of it. So just keep this, and when you need to, go look at it, because it's a little complex. And so anyway, so we'll go to Article 8, whether the form of the ecclesiastical government is monarchical. So this is obviously very important. 12.1, the many forms of government. The matter which we are now discussing will be confirmed by arguments which are proper to it when it is necessary to treat of the primacy of St. Peter and of the Roman pontiffs. But in order that we progress step by step, and by reason, the form of the ecclesiastical government must be here explained. By so doing, the entire constitution of the church can be placed in a single view. The first kind of government is democracy, or government of the people. That means, as Lincoln said, by the people. The second is aristocracy, or the principality of the leading men. So aristos means best in Greek. So kratein means to rule, to have power. So anything that's krat is ruler. So that's demos means people. So that's how you get democracy. See how wonderful Greek is. Or it is possible to have a mixture of these diverse forms of government. So that's said in monarchy is the rule of one person. Monos means one. Arcane again means power or ruler or ruling. You see. So, and you can have a mixture. As a matter of fact, St. Thomas says that the ideal government is a mixture of all three. So that's in his De Regimine Principum. But he says the best is monarchy. All Catholic philosophers say the best is monarchy, but you'll see that there is absolute monarchy and temperate monarchy. That is, a temperate monarchy is a monarch that has certain rules which determine and limit his power. An absolute monarch is just, his word is it. And if you have a saint who is an absolute monarch, that's probably your best form of government. In other words, where he is going to always say the right thing. But it's dangerous. Yes?
Is a temperate monarchy similar to something like a constitution?
No. Constitutional monarchy is a whole other thing. That's where the monarch is simply a symbol, like the British monarchy. It's a symbol of England or something. And all the power is in the parliament or assembly. That's a constitutional monarchy, and that is a joke. Temperate monarchy means that there is at least a constitution, if not written, at least by custom. There are certain things that he cannot do. For example, the king in the Middle Ages could not take away the land, the acre, from a serf by custom. Something he can't do. You see, as there should be certain rules, and we're going to see that the papacy is a temperate monarchy. That he is subject to the faith. He can't change the faith. He can't. You see, that's in that sense. That's sort of the church's constitution. But a constitutional monarch is a whole other thing. That's all of these European monarchies now, where they just walk around in fancy clothes and look nice and show up for parades, but have no power. No, monarch has power, but he can have a temperate power in the sense that certain things he cannot do. So the fourfold form of monarchy we call a monarchy that which is the government of one person. Therefore, in any monarchy which is true to the name, the supreme social power is in one person. But the supreme power is either total and undivided, or held collectively and by division. In the first case, there is a simple monarchy. In the second case, there is a mixed monarchy. So the simple monarchy is subdivided into absolute and temperate. Absolute is that which the ruler alone has the power, that in which the ruler alone has the supreme power in such a way that his power is not in any way limited by fundamental laws. That means a constitution or anything you want to call it, proper to a determined society. You could also have that by custom. A temperate monarchy is one which commands with the power of legislation, but within the limits of fundamental laws which the society has beforehand, which the ruler presupposes, and which therefore the social authority cannot abolish or contradict, but according to these fundamental laws, make laws for the society which is committed to him. See, so he is not free to do just whatever he pleases. So that's a temperate monarchy. And those were the medieval monarchies. Their customs, they didn't have written constitutions. That didn't come about really until I think the state of Connecticut. I think that's the Constitution state. They were the first one to have an actual constitution, written constitution. And even the British Constitution is unwritten, I think. It's just certain things you do and you don't do. And I don't think they have a written constitution, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just, you see, in Catholic political philosophy, which is a course you should take one day, which we give here, and it's very interesting. It pertains to the people to determine how they will be ruled and who shall rule them. But the people are not the subject of power, which is one of the big errors of democracy. All power comes from God, and a mass of people cannot be a subject of power, because who uses that power? You see, so they can only select how they will be governed. Will be a monarchy, will be a republic, and the church is indifferent to that in the sense that it doesn't get involved in it. But the power is in those who are designated as presidents or kings or whatever they are, or a Congress. A Congress is, in this country, is the supreme lawmaker. And it doesn't matter. So that's what Catholic political philosophy is. And Bellarmine said, and people, in his time, said that the power which comes from God, the political power, because St. Paul says all power comes from God, it rests in the people, but then it is handed over to the monarch or the ruler, and they don't have it anymore. As soon as he is designated, then they hand it over to him. And that was known as the translation theory. But the designation theory came in after the French Revolution, and that is something that was always said of the papacy. Everyone held it of the papacy, and that is there is a designation from below, but the power comes directly from above. And then all of the Catholic theologians said, even in political power, that's true. So those are things you can discuss. Now, but it has always been said of the papacy that the designation comes from below, the power comes from above. And it seems to make more sense. Again, how can a mass of people be the subject of power? And all power comes from God. So it seems that the designation theory is better even for political power. All right. So when we're talking about a pope, we're talking about designation theory. So the ruler and the people can change the fundamental laws by mutual consent in the Constitution if these laws have been made by them, but not if they have not been made by them alone, as in the case of natural law. So natural law obviously can never be changed by any vote or anything like that, contrary to common thought today. So, witness the procession in St. Peter's Basilica last week. All right. A mixed monarchy is divided into that which is commonly called mixed and representative. In the mixed monarchy, the king governs, but not alone, because the total legislative power resides in the political body, of which the king is a part only, although the principal part. Let's see, that doesn't even survive in what you call a constitutional monarchy. Although in principle it does. You see, in principle, the King of England can refuse to sign any act of Parliament, and if he doesn't sign it, it's not law. That is the Constitution of England. If he doesn't sign it, though, he's going to get his head chopped off. See, so the last one not to sign it, I think, was in the 18th century. One of the Georges in the 18th century. Ever since, it's been, just okay, whatever. It's all just a sham ceremony. But he technically has that power. See, that's what Louis XVI actually wanted. He said, I don't mind if you have an assembly, but I will retain the absolute veto power. In other words, if you pass a law that I don't like, then it goes. In other words, which was somewhat the opposite of what was, because there was a state and the States General. They would discuss laws and everything, but at a certain point, the king could say, "Le roi le veut," which means the king wills it, and that was it. See, so that was the way the medieval monarchy worked. But then you had the severe absolutism of Louis XIV, Louis XVI, Louis XV, and XVI. Where the king's word was law, and that led to a lot of. They never called this the Estates General, which was their at least consultative body for the king. You see, and it just became, and that idea of an absolute monarchy came from Protestantism. It did not come from Catholicism. Catholicism always had the moderate, temperate monarchies. Anyway, so that's we get into that. So and Cardinal Ziliara, I'm quoting Cardinal Ziliara here. A representative monarchy is improperly called a monarchy. See, so the British type, or even the American, I mean the president has a lot of power. He can veto a law, and they need 2/3 to overcome that veto. That's pretty powerful. And many times they don't get that 2/3. It's very rare that they get the 2/3 to overcome the veto. So he has a lot of power, even legislative power. So, but anyway, in it, the social authority is given not to the ruler, but to the people, who elect deputies who, in the name and authority of the people which is delegated to them, make laws. So that's democracy in its ugliest form, and that is that the deputies are there merely to act as agents of the people, because all of the power is in the people, and they get whatever they want. So it's not as if we're sending you to Congress or something and you make your judgments according to your own conscience on what you feel is best. You are required to do what we dictate to do. So it's a true democracy in that sense. And democracy, everybody hated democracy. Aristotle, Plato, it's all bad. So no one ever defended democracy, radical democracy, except Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a nut, a debauched nut. So not that we have anything against him or anything. The notion of ecclesiastical monarchy. Because monarchy consists in the government of one person, it does not matter that if one person who governs is called a king or emperor or consul or ruler, whatever you want to call him, that's who he is. For this reason, in the ecclesiastical order as well, we can consider the monarchy, which is the plenitude of supreme ecclesiastical power in the Roman pontiff alone. We will understand clearly the notion of this monarchy if we fix our attention on the following things. So this is important for collegiality. We're going to see that a little later. Father Dutertra wrote a very excellent, I shouldn't use two superlatives together, an excellent analysis of collegiality, how it destroys the authority of the Pope, and we'll go through that. The ecclesiastical monarchy is simple, for whatever power pertains to the episcopacy pertains to the Roman pontiff in a more eminent manner, who therefore has supreme, total, and undivided power. The ecclesiastical monarchy is temperate in the sense in which we have explained the word temperate. The power of the Roman pontiff is limited by the law of the gospel and by the laws fixed by Christ. So the entire teaching of the Catholic Church, he's limited by that. He cannot overthrow that. 3. The ecclesiastical monarchy was divinely instituted in Peter and his successors. It thus happens that no other form of government may be used in the Church. One might ask whether the Church has an aristocratic and democratic form. I respond, the Church, improperly speaking and in a broad sense, has a mixture of aristocracy and of democracy. For the form of the Church, this is Iliara, for the form of the Church is aristocratic to the extent that the vicar of Christ is bound to use the bishops in the care and government of the Church. So obviously he cannot rule the entire Church from Rome. So bishops, which pertain to the very constitution of the Church, have their own dioceses, and they rule their dioceses, however, under the rule of the Pope. In other words, he can tell them to do whatever he wants them to do. And it has some democracy in it because the Roman pontiff is elected and does not possess the office by hereditary title, and because both he and the bishops can be taken from any people, language, or condition of life. So, for example, Sixtus V was a shepherd boy. So you can rise in the Catholic Church. You can't. In the old monarchies, forget it. If you were born of a peasant, you're not going anyplace. You're going to be a peasant for the rest of your life. You're going to be shoveling cow manure for your whole life. Right? There was no ability to rise. All of the officers of the army were taken from the nobility. See? The nobility were like 10 or 20% of the country, and you just, it was impossible to rise. See, in any of the European monarchies, but in the Catholic Church, St. Pius V was, just poor and helping his parents with their poor little farm. And the Dominicans were walking by and he talked to them and they said, you have a vocation. And he went and told his parents, I have to go with them because they say I have a vocation. He was 15 years old. And his parents, okay. And then, the rest is history. They didn't say okay, I'm sure they said va bene or something like that. And the rest is history. I mean, he rose very quickly. And well, there are other cases of St. Pius X was a farm boy. I mean, I saw his house. The kitchen was originally dirt floor, and I said to the woman who was actually related to St. Pius X at the time, this was many years ago, she was a distant cousin, obviously there was some time, but she was related by being a cousin to him, and she looked like him a little bit. And she said that, well, when Pius X became the Bishop of Mantua, he put in a tile floor for his mother. Yeah, so the floor is tile, but all the books say the floor was dirt, so I said, why is it tile? And that was the history of it. And his mother also made him, when he was made Patriarch of Venice, maybe you know this, made him come to her house, this little, very modest house, in Riese, a very modest little town, and sit with all of his choir robes on so that she could see him. So she was so proud of him. So normally you wouldn't be wearing your choir robes at that time, but he had to sit in his choir robes on. You see, after Pius IX gave what is known as the abito piano. It used to be before the abito piano. That's why it's called piano. That's the red and the half cape. That's the habito piano. It used to be that bishops would wear the whole day their choir robes, including the surplice, the rochet. I mean, that's how you would see that the whole day. Yes. I'm just thinking of the spaghetti sauce. You know? It's true. I mean, things happen, you know, and sometimes you have to take a stain off of these kind. There's one right here, and but I'm thinking, and you know, your sleeve is like this. I mean, you move, you know, but that's what they would do. Yeah, that was their uniform. Anyway, that's a little background for you. So yes, in other words, the church has an aristocracy, but it has an open aristocracy based on merit, not on birth. Errors concerning the constitution of the church. Democratic errors. At the beginning of the 14th century, Marsilius Menandrinus, called Petavius, right, and John of Jaduno, professors in Paris, wrote a book entitled Defensorium Pacis. In it, they defended the thesis that ecclesiastical power resides in the community of the faithful. This is 1300s. The reformers of the 16th century, Luther, etc., rejected the hierarchy and concocted a universal priesthood together with a completely democratic church. The others said that the ecclesiastical power resides in the people, but that it must be transferred necessarily to pastors whose grades were determined by Christ. See, it is an error to assert that the ecclesiastical power cannot be exercised independently of the people. This dependency could be juridical, which demands the consent of the people either antecedently in selecting pastors or consequently in approving laws, or it could be a moral dependency, which means that if laws are made without consulting the people, they are valid, but nevertheless an injury is done to the people. These are all errors. Aristocratic errors. The Presbyterians, they're called that because they rejected the Anglican bishops. They did not want a church with bishops. So that's John Knox, Scotland. Exaggerated the grade and power of priests, setting aside the office of bishops. The errors condemned by Pius VI. The doctrine which states that the reformation of abuses in regard to ecclesiastical discipline ought equally to depend upon and be established by the bishop and the parish priests in diocesan synods, and that without the freedom of decision, obedience would not be due to the suggestions and orders of the bishops. False, rash, harmful to episcopal authority, subversive of hierarchical government, favoring the heresy of Arius, which was renewed by Calvin. Likewise, the doctrine by which parish priests and other priests gathered in a synod are declared judges of faith, together with the bishop, and at the same time it is intimated that they are qualified for judgment in matters of faith by their own right, and have indeed received it by ordination. False, rash, subversive of hierarchical order, detracting from the strength of dogmatic definitions or judgments of the church, at least erroneous. And that's from Auctorum Fidei, condemning the Synod of Pistoia. Pistoia is a suburb of Florence, and it was a synod done in the 1780s of all of the Jansenistic liberals of Europe. They all came to it. I mean, it wasn't just a local diocesan synod. It was like like a political convention for everybody that was rotten in Europe. See, there was a lot of Jansenism, and this all proceeds from Jansenism. So, as I said, all the courts were Jansenistic. And so he condemned all that. The third error is similar to the second, namely that the power of pastors comes immediately from Christ, and that the authority of bishops is extraordinary in parish affairs. So pastor means the person in charge of a parish, that he gets his power immediately from Christ, and that the authority of bishops is extraordinary in parish affairs. And so the bishop can't touch him except for something terrible. That's also condemned. The error of the Gallicans is that the plenitude of supreme power resides not in the Roman pontiff alone, but in him with the body of bishops, or at least with a smaller part of them. And look, compare Vatican II. The order of bishops, which succeeds to the college of apostles and gives this apostolic body continued existence, is also the subject of supreme and full power over the universal church, provided we understand this body together with its head, the Roman pontiff, and never without its head. See, so what the Vatican II did was create. First they say the Roman pontiff, he's it. That's the first part of that. But then they say this, and if you read Father Duterre's analysis, is very, very good. He cites a lot of different sources. The power of the Roman pontiff derives from this college of bishops. He has power over the church because he's the head of this college of bishops, which is false. See, but we'll see that later. But that's very similar to the Gallican idea that that the plenitude of supreme power resides not in the Roman pontiff alone, but in him with the body of bishops, or at least with a smaller part of them. That's an old error. And we'll see in the supplement. I still have to print out that supplement for you. That was also condemned by Pius VI. So, the following errors combine the aristocratic error and the democratic error, that of Edmund Richer, who asserted in 1611 in his book entitled De Ecclesiastica et Politica Potestate that jurisdiction primarily and essentially belongs to the people, and ministerially to the Roman pontiff and the bishops. So they are representatives of the people. That the ministerial power of the Roman pontiff is limited by the ministerial power of the bishops. 3, that laws, whether made by councils or outside of councils, require the acceptance of the people. 4, that the organs of the people in relation to the bishop are priests who are pastors. Richer was condemned and then repented. He died in 1631. B, there is the error of Marcus Antonius de Dominis, who in his work entitled De Republica Ecclesiastica contra Primatum Papae, on the ecclesiastical republic against the primacy of the Pope, that's quite a title, asserted that the right of electing the ministers of the church pertained by divine right to the people. So this is all the result of Protestantism, democracy. Asserted that the bishops were not subject to the power of the Pope. In 1763, a yet worse error broke out when a book appeared entitled Justini Febronii Juris Consulti de Statu Ecclesiae et de Legitima Potestate Romani Pontificis Liber Singularis reuniendos dissidentes in Religione Christianos Compositos. I'll translate that for you in case you missed a word here or there. So the author says of Justin Febronius, a lawyer. He was, and you can see his picture there, on the state of the church concerning the legitimate power of the Roman pontiff, a singular book concerning that, Liber Singularis. You see what Latin does? It puts the subject right at the end. That's the beauty of Latin, is that you put words all over the sentence, and you have to figure it out. For the purpose of reuniting the dissidents, meaning Protestants, compose or put together in religion, Christian religion. So the Christian dissidentes in religione Christianis compositos. So getting Protestants back. Nicholas de Hontheim, the suffragan bishop of Trier, it's northwestern Germany, under the false name of Febronius. The reason he took Febronius was because his girlfriend was Febronia. Yes. Yes, he had a girlfriend. Yeah, so he was known as Febronius because of Febronia. And so, I know it was really bad. The bitterly attacked. See, the problem in Germany was that in the Middle Ages, the popes conceded to the potentates of the Holy Roman Empire the power to name bishops, because the bishops were very powerful. And so they said, we wanted people in there that we can count on and will not give us trouble. So, but the Pope would give them power to rule the diocese, and that was hotly discussed too. Whether the emperor could give them the power to rule the diocese, but they could nominate these bishops. Well, as time went on, and as people became, let's say, more and more liberal, these bishops were pretty bad. The 18th century had a lot of bishops, and see, the King of France had the right to do that too. So there were a lot of bishops who were, from the point of view of faith, practically zero, or very, they maybe weren't heretics, but they didn't care much about it, let's say. And the other was that they were immoral, quite a few of them. Yeah. I think I told you the famous comment of Louis XVI, the Bishop of Toulouse. Did I ever tell you that? Yeah. The Archbishop of Paris died, and somebody suggested to him that he put the Bishop of Toulouse in Paris. And he said, well, I think it would be appropriate if the Archbishop of Paris believed in God. That's how bad it was. Yeah, and there was another one under Louis XV too that had a whole bunch of women and everything like that, and they just became really almost figures of state. Religion took a back seat. Not everyone. There were some very good ones too, but it was a common practice that they became very secularized. The 18th century was not a good century. That's when a lot of rot that we have now was hatched. And but the 19th century and early 20th century, the church functioned very, very well. It got rid of that problem. So that's why, for example, Pius X refused to nominate bishops that the Third Republic wanted. He essentially said, drop dead, and I'll assign my own bishops to France. And he consecrated 14 bishops in one ceremony. Imagine that ceremony. Being the MC, you would have to go to the hospital after that. So, yeah, he had no use for the Third Republic. The Third Republic was horrible. It was a horrible government in France, and there was an attempt by Leo XIII to sort of make peace with it, which totally failed. But St. Pius X was very much not in the pocket of the Third Republic at all, or in any way favored any kind of accommodation to the Third Republic. So that's when the Third Republic negated or canceled the Concordat made with Napoleon in 1801, and confiscated all of the church properties. So all the cathedrals and everything confiscated. So to this day, they belong to the state, which is actually a blessing in disguise because the state fixes them up a lot and prevents them from being transformed too much into what the Novus Ordo would like to do. Same thing is true in Italy. You know, the Novus Ordo would go in and make something that looks like a modern Cracker Barrel out of them, you know, and but the state, you know, because of tourism and just preservation of heritage, etc. So it actually was a blessing in disguise. For example, the fire in Notre Dame, if that had belonged to the Novus Ordo, probably it would still be a ruin. And if they did fix it up, it would have been completely transformed into something disgustingly ugly. So, but the state, it's the only thing that they, Macron put in some modern stained glass here and there. You can always smash it. It's easily replaced. Anyway, so anyway, this Febronius, he was famous, and he bitterly attacked the true doctrine concerning the constitution of the church. And under the false names of Ioannis Clericus and Aulus Jordanus, defended his errors, which had been refuted very diligently by the most learned men. Febronius asserts, one, that the people participate in the ecclesiastical power, synodality, extolled beyond measure the power of the bishops, synodality, collegiality, diminish the power of the Roman pontiff, which is synodality and collegiality. From this source, the evil of Febronianism rose up, by which many tried to subvert the ecclesiastical constitution and hand over the church to the civil power. All right, and there he is. Those girlfriends must have been desperate. That girlfriend of his must have been desperate. I'd like to see what she looked like. So you had prince bishops in Germany. Getting back to the original, a famous prince bishop was the one that hired Mozart in Salzburg, and he was no prize either. But he liked good music. I'll say that for him. So he did a lot of his sacred music, early sacred music in Salzburg, and then probably his greatest work, which is the Great Mass in C minor. He did that for his wife, who was cured of a disease. He made a vow that if my wife was cured of a certain disease, a serious disease, that he would write a mass. And it's a magnificent piece of work. So it's certainly among his top 5. So the form of ecclesiastical government is monarchy. Argument 1, monarchy is said to be that form of government by which the whole power resides in one person, but the plenitude of spiritual power was given to St. Peter and his successors in the primacy, the Roman pontiffs. Ergo, the proof of the minor will be done in question 16. In other words, the whatever comes after but. That's the minor. Objections. Objection 1, in the Council of Jerusalem held by the apostles, a decree was sanctioned also by lay people. Therefore, in this period of the church, there was a democratic order. Proof of the antecedent, what you just read, is found in Acts 15:22. Then it pleased the apostles and ancients, that means the elders, with the whole church, that means the priests, ancients, to choose men of their own company, and send to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas, namely Judas, who was surnamed Barsabas, and Silas, chief men among the brethren. So Judas was a common name at that time. Don't think there was only one Judas. That's the objection, is that the Council of Jerusalem sent these people out. Response, I deny the antecedent and the proof of it by distinguishing. The decree was sent with the applause of the church, that is, the lay people, I concede. That it was sanctioned by the lay people, I deny. Sanctioning means lawmaking. That the sanctioning of the decree was attributed to the apostles and ancients, the presbyters, is proved, A, from the title of the decree, the apostles and ancients, brethren, to the brethren of the Gentiles that are at Antioch and in Syria and Cilicia, greeting. See, so the brethren, you see, the church was commonly referred to as the brotherhood. So you see that in St. Paul, the fraternitas. So that's why the brethren, you see, that's what people, the faithful, essentially, fratres. That's why St. Paul addresses people, fratres, at the beginning of his epistles. So likewise, in chapter 15, verse 5, verses 2 and 6, a question to be decided is attributed to the apostles and the ancients. That's where they decided that it was not necessary for converts to the Catholic faith to observe the Judaic law, the Council of Jerusalem. And that's where St. Paul chastised St. Peter for eating with the Jews and not coming and eating with the Gentiles, because the Jews didn't want to eat with the Gentiles. And St. Paul said, you're not supposed to do that. It was not a question of doctrine, it was a question of St. Peter's conduct, that you should not be eating with the Jews. They are wrong not to eat with the Gentiles, and you shouldn't encourage them. That was St. Paul. So the idea that he was resisting Peter is false. He was scolding him legitimately, which is legitimate to do. St. Thomas talks about it if it's for a serious reason. An inferior can correct a superior in very limited circumstances if he's doing something scandalous. But it has nothing to do with resisting his power or his authority or anything like that. Instance, in the received Greek text, we read that the apostles and ancients and the brothers, kai hoi adelphoi, wrote to Antioch. Therefore, the lay people had no small part in sanctioning the decree. Response: given the reading of the received text, nothing follows. For since the multitude or lay people in this case were at the council materially and not formally, that is, they were there as witnesses and not judges, it was possible that a certain mention be made of the multitude in letters to the churches. See, they were there in the bleachers, so to speak. In other words, they were there as observers. That the sanction pertained only to the apostles and the ancients is indicated 3 times. For A, Paul and Barnabas ascended to the apostles and priests to Jerusalem about this question. In the same chapter, verse 6, St. Luke writes, and the apostles and ancients assembled to consider of this matter. Likewise in 16:4, dogmas are commemorated which were decreed by the apostles and ancients. But if any doubt should remain, the many texts which I adduced in Article 4 concerning the hierarchical constitution of the Church should remove all doubt. We did not deny the received text and the brethren, although 5 very ancient and very reliable manuscripts, and that's the way manuscripts are done with the Hebrew letter, that's the Aleph, ABCD, that is the Codex Sinaiticus, which is in St. Petersburg. Yes, it's one of the ancient texts of the sacred scripture, and from the 5th century, and the Alexandrinus, which is in London, from the 5th century, and the Vaticanus from the 4th century, which is in the Vatican. The Ephraim Syrus Rescript in Paris from the 5th century, and the Beza Cantabrigensis, both Greek and Latin, from the 6th century, all omit the brethren. It's not there. It is also admitted in the Itala, the Vulgate, and the Armenian versions. It is also omitted by the Protestants Mill, Griesbach, Lachmann, Bornmann, Buttermann, and Tischendorf in their 8th critical edition. So there's serious doubt as to whether it should even be there. Objection 2. If it is the law that those who are set over the church must be elected by the faithful, then you have a democratic constitution. But we see Matthias elected as an apostle and the 7 deacons elected by the multitude. Therefore, the constitution of the primitive church was democratic. Response: I distinguish the major. If the law of electing is divine, I concede. If it is by apostolic concession, I deny. And I distinguish the minor. The multitude elected Matthias and the deacons by divine law, I deny. By apostolic concession, I subdistinguish. By a consultative vote, I concede. Consultative means one that is not binding, but simply, we would like your opinion. I concede. By a decisive vote, I deny. Indeed, that the right to any vote has been given by God to the people is a gratuitous assertion. There's no basis for it. In our case, there is discerned a special reason to seek the advice of the faithful, for it was necessary that one man succeed to Judas's place who had been with the apostles at all times, as sacred scripture states. Wherefore, of these men who have accompanied with us all the time that the Lord Jesus came in and went out among us, beginning from the baptism of John until the day wherein he was taken up from us, one of these must be made a witness of us, of his resurrection, with us of his resurrection. So somebody had to replace Judas. The idea of constituting deacons was the occasion of murmuring, which needed to be quieted. For this reason, the 12 prudently said to the multitude, Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of good reputation, full of the Holy Ghost and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. And they were made to wait on tables, don't ever forget that. Because that was considered a type of sacred function, the care of the poor. Today, proclamations are customarily done in order that the suitability of those being promoted to orders become more apparent. So there would be, in the dioceses, there would be an announcement that so-and-so is going to be ordained a priest. Does anybody have any objections? And they would do that. You never know. Instance, St. Paul writes to the Corinthians, For what have I to do to judge them that are without? Do not you judge them that are within? For them that are without, God will judge. Put away the evil one from among yourselves. Therefore, the power of judging and expelling a man did not belong to a superior, but to a community in a clearly democratic manner. Response: I distinguish the antecedent. The St. Paul in the quotation was establishing the strict norm of ecclesiastical jurisdiction. I deny. That he was speaking in a general way of avoiding Christians who were criminals openly. I concede. For this reason, Weizsäcker and others from this text and from analogous texts were unable to prove that the primeval condition of the church was essentially democratic. And you can see who he was, a German Protestant theologian. Was born in Öhringen near Heilbronn in Württemberg and studied at Tübingen, which is like a hellhole, in Berlin. After studying at the University of Hellhole, and the Friedrich Wilhelm University of Berlin became a Privatdozent. That means teacher that didn't get paid. At Tübingen, the hellhole, in 1847, and professor of ecclesiastical and dogmatic history in 1861. So anyway, you can read the rest of it if you can. You can learn German to understand it. In 1861, he succeeded Ferdinand Christian Bauer, who was a radical rationalist. As professor for history of church and dogma at Helmholtz. Later, he became chancellor of the university. That's where Ratzinger and Kung functioned. You see, it has a Protestant side and a Catholic side. But it was originally Protestant, but then there was the Catholic, but it became in the 20th century like the super hellhole, a deep hellhole for modernism. And Ratzinger was there, and so was Hans Kung and somebody else too. Some other big one. It's, when you see Tübingen, it's bad. There's nothing good that ever came out of Tübingen. All right, today is 9/10. All right, very good. You're getting there. Nemini Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, amen. Sub tuum praesidium confugimus sancta Dei genitrix nostros deprecationis et despicias et necessitatibus et periculis cunctis libera nos semper per gloriosa benedicta. Amen. Nemini Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.